Hello and welcome back to another episode of the podcast. So this week I am joined by another guest. This guest is incredible and this conversation was so insightful. So I am joined by Emma, who is a trauma therapist specialising in narcissistic abuse. And she is the CEO and founder of the first ever app that helps women track behaviours of narcissistic abuse. It is called My Nara. So it was such a privilege to get Emma onto the podcast, and in this episode we talk all of the things narcissism. We chat about what it actually is, you know, what you can look out for in terms of red flags, how you can start your healing process, how you can be realistic with your healing process. We talk through trauma bonds, we talk through the impact that narcissistic abuse has on sense of self, and it's just such an invaluable conversation. And I think every woman needs to listen to this, and almost like everybody needs to listen to an episode like this so they just are aware when they meet people of things to look out for in terms of narcissistic behavior. So I hope that you love this episode as much as I loved recording it for you guys, and let's dive right in. Hello Emma, welcome to the podcast. I am very excited for the conversation that we're about to have, and I think excited is probably an interesting word to describe it, but I know that this is something that so many people need to hear, and they need to hear this conversation from somebody who is an expert in the space and can give them, you know, the right advice and the safe advice that is required when we talk about such things as abusive relationships, narcissism. And I'm going to touch on this in the intro, but one of the reasons why I wanted to get you into this podcast is because narcissism is a word that I see so much on social media at the moment. And, you know, I see a lot of people just automatically go into, oh, this person's a narcissist, maybe this is narcissistic. And actually, in a way that feels a little bit unhelpful for those people who actually might be struggling in these types of relationships. So can you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Thank you, Lydia. So my name's Emma Davey, and I'm the founder and CEO of My Trauma Therapy and the My Nara App, which stands for My Narcissistic Abuse Recovery App.
That's amazing. How long have you been doing this work for? And, you know, why is it that you are such an advocate for this work?
I've been doing it probably for about 4 years now, and I'm probably where I am because I lived and breathed it for 4 years, as in I trained as a counsellor, and every spare moment I was reading, researching narcissism, cluster B personality disorders. I needed to know everything about it for me to understand what had happened to me personally, because I am also a survivor of narcissistic abuse, and actually got my abuser, Ashley Southgate, convicted for coercive control last year, and he received 19 months in prison. It was such a long process, and I came up against so many hurdles, emotionally, physically, psychologically, and I just didn't understand what was happening to me, as in why I kept going back when I was in the relationship. So the trauma bond, the addiction, and at the time when I was going through it, people weren't talking about it. I really had to research deep in to actually get the word narcissist, because I think at the time I was researching it was literally like psychopath, sociopath. That's the only two categories that people spoke about. So I just really want to help other people go through the horrendous stages that they go through when suffering narcissistic abuse.
That's interesting you mentioned stages, because I've never actually heard of the stages. So could you explain those a little bit to the listeners? What is the stages of coming out of a narcissistic relationship?
Well, I always say with the first stage is denial, because it might be somebody else say to you, oh, I think he or she is very controlling. Why have you stopped coming out with us? Or why have you stopped wearing makeup? Or you might even notice that you've stopped being the person that you were before the relationship. But then you start making excuses. for that narcissistic person, because at the beginning they were so amazing, and you just want to sweep everything under the carpet that's bad, because you just want to focus on the amazing time that you had in the beginning, because that felt incredible. That was a fantasy, that was the scam, and where you were groomed at the beginning. So because of the intensifying chemical releases that your body got at the time, which is oxytocin, dopamine, and serotonin, it's exactly the same chemical releases that you get with heroin. So that's why it's actually really hard to come off. So that's why the first stage is denial, because you don't actually want to admit that you are in an abusive relationship, and the person that says I love you is actually destroying you.
That, even like when you say that, is just, I feel that, in the sense of forming this attachment with somebody who you love. And I'm guessing, is there a sense that they're over romanticized, over idealized, so that love compared to the reality of who this person actually is, and that realization of, oh my god, this person is destroying me, it's like, how does someone even make sense of that and comprehend that?
It takes a lot of time to come out of the denial phase, and that's why the second stage is the realization stage, because you can see it. And that's why I say to people, look up narcissism, look at, you know, the love bombing, what that stands for, what it looks like, look at gaslighting, what that looks like, so you can actually categorize it in the relationship and when you're receiving that behavior. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it, and that really does help. But when you come into the realization stage, you've then got to make a decision. Do I stay or do I go? But when people come and see me and they're still in these relationships, I do say, if you stay in this relationship, you have to accept this person is never going to change. Now, you could go back and want to try and fix this person, because a lot of people that are in relationship with narcissistic people are very empathetic. And the narcissist has learned your pattern of behavior. They know what you want. Everyone wants to be loved, but especially empaths. They want to be loved. They want to be cared. A lot of empaths suffer with codependency issues. So where you give a lot of your time, a lot of yourself, a lot of your energy to other people, and you actually forget about yourself. So we as empaths want to just fix, because the narcissist will always have a pity party or a sob story where it's, oh, my life's this. They've always got an excuse. And you as the empath feel that and think, of course, I'm not going to leave you. I will stay. I will do whatever it takes, because I want to fix you and make you happy. So you forget about your own needs. It's all about them. But they are never going to change. And it can take years for somebody to get to the realization stage of being with a narcissist.
So after that stage, what's the next? I imagine there's a stage of grieving. The next stage after realization?
Realization, you will be feeling pain, you'll be feeling guilt, you'll be feeling anger. So within this stage, I talk about the nervous system, so the autonomic nervous system, and what's happening to you. So people will not understand why they're energyless, or they have got chronic fatigue, or they're angry, or they're lying, or they're full of anxiety. They don't understand why they're feeling all these things. And these are called protector parts that come up within you. So your nervous system is either going to go into freeze, or it's going to go into fight, flight, or there's another part called the ventral vagal, and that's where you're safe, and that's your true self. But if you are around narcissistic people or in a relationship with a narcissist, your nervous system will never be in this part. It will always be in a trauma response. So yes, you'll be feeling loads of things. And also the narcissist is going to be playing a huge part in trying to manipulate you, gaslight you, you know, trying to make out it's all your fault. The smear campaign, trying to manipulate others that you are the problem, so you feel very isolated. So yeah, there's loads of things in this section that I work with people to then get to the next stage, which is acceptance and walking away. And again, that can take months to get to that point. This is no quick fix, unfortunately.
No, because it's when you start to bring those layers of nervous system in, and it's like the regulation again, finding safety with self. You know, something from I haven't experienced this in particular, but just from a lot of stress that I've had over the last 2 years, kind of processing on a cognitive level. And then I must have got to a level of safety almost, and like starting to really slow down, and my body just started to release all of this stress. Is that something you see in your clients as well, like high levels of cortisol that women are carrying, high stress levels? And are they aware of this, or is there almost a part of them that is so used to this way of living they forgot what it's like before they were with a narcissistic person?
Yeah, the thing is, the majority of the people I speak to, this isn't their first narcissistic relationship. They may have had parents that are narcissistic, or they've had a narcissistic experience at school. So this pattern of behavior of being treated really horrendously may have been followed through to adulthood. So you might finally come to the realization and be able to put a label on narcissistic abuse, and then realize I've been a victim of narcissistic abuse for years, even before this particular relationship, or my whole life. So they've never been in that safe place. They don't know who they are around this or outside of this. So there are so many different things with recovering from narcissistic abusers. If you don't actually know who you are, then we have to work to a place where you create a new version of yourself. Because if you've been around narcissistic people a lot, then the person that you are is the person that they have molded you into being, because obviously it benefits them. So that's why trauma therapy, it takes a long time to unpick this. Now, someone might come and see me that's been in a marriage with a narcissist for, say, 20 years, or they've started dating someone and it's been 6 months and they just feel absolutely overwhelmed by it all. So it very much is tailored to what that person is experiencing. But yeah, within the nervous system and the way that you're feeling, most people can't even get out of bed, or they're isolating. You know, over 85% of chronic illnesses is due to stress. If you're with a narcissist, your body is just trying to cope, and when you're in that fight or flight, then your body's flooded with cortisol and adrenaline to keep you going, which enables you to get away or fight back. So yeah, there's so many things that are going on with your body, and that's where I also say listen to your body.
Can you explain what narcissism is?
Yeah, so it's someone that has narcissistic personality disorder. So this is a mental health condition, and these people will have very high self-importance. They can be very grandiose, not all the time. It's all about their needs. They're very selfish. They do not have any empathy. So they do not have it in their brain to give it. So you can't expect a narcissist to give empathy because they actually don't have it, which they cognitively can show empathy. So if they're in a situation where someone's died and they might be in the workplace, they might say sorry for your loss, but actually inside they couldn't care less. Or they might cognitively say sorry when you're saying that I'm leaving you because I can't stand being in this relationship anymore, and they might cry as well. They might get down on their knees and say, please don't leave me. But that's them saying, I haven't finished abusing you yet. The worst thing you can do to a narcissist is discard them. In many cases, I've seen the narcissist hoover the victim back in to then discard them themselves. Just so that they have that power and control. It is very much about power and control. Narcissists live in their own fantasy world, which they might say. You might hear a narcissistic person be like, oh, I've done this, I know this person, be very, I'm so wonderful and love talking about myself. They have to have the best car, they have to have the best watch, all for show. And that's just the facade that they are portraying. They've got to make out that they are better than everybody else, because actually narcissistic people are very, very insecure. So they need to manipulate others in thinking that they are this amazing person. They have, a lot of them have addictive personalities as well. And this is because they don't actually feel anything. So alcohol, drugs, porn, sex, gambling. When you have an addictive personality and you display addictive behavior, so I'm just going to take sex and porn because I've had this a lot recently. When someone is having sex or when they are orgasming, you're actually feeling something. You have got hormones and chemical releases going into your body. Now, that's exactly the same with narcissists, but it's the first time they actually feel something, because they don't feel happy, they don't get excited, they are very emotionally dead inside. But when they're having sex and when they're having, getting the orgasms, they actually finally feel something that feels good. So they're just going to want it more and more and more. It's very common for a narcissistic person to, they're pathological liars, but cheat as well in relationships, because they actually get off on portraying that they are one version of to you. So they might have these expectations of, I'll only be with this person, they've got to look like this, they've got to be that type of person, as in for you to be on their arm so they can show off to the world of, yes, I'm with her or him. But actually they're actually cheating with behind your back with someone completely the opposite of what they portray that they would only be with. And that is because supply is their oxygen. They have to have multiple different people giving them supply and validation, again, because they're very insecure. And they're also very bored people. So it's like having that false life. And they also get off on the fact that they're portraying their one person to you, you believe in it, but then them having a secret life and doing what they want and then coming back to you and still portraying that they're this amazing person.
So if someone's listening to this now and potentially thinking that their partner's a narcissist, I just imagine someone listening to this and then thinking, oh my God, so that means they probably have a secret life. What are the most, this might be a difficult question, but one of the most common traits that you see clients bring to you around their partner? So having that extra life might actually be one. So that might be super jarring for people and like really uncomfortable for people to listen to that. But is there key characteristics and things that you hear that start to prick your ears to, okay, this person could potentially be in a narcissistic relationship?
I would also look at control. So is someone having a lot of control over you? Are you able to be your true self without feeling like you're walking around on eggshells? Is someone making you feel like you're not good enough? Gaslighting. Is someone are you questioning your own sense of reality sometimes, where you think, did I say that, or did they do that? Are you hearing, oh, this is you again, you're forgetting something, you're always doing this, you need to go to the doctors, you're crazy, or oh, I'm just joking, you're so sensitive, no wonder people don't like you, or I don't even think your mum and dad like you. Things like that make you think that other people are judging you and making you question your own sense of reality. Gaslighting is 100%, you're going to receive that in a narcissistic relationship. Putting you down a lot, saying a compliment but saying something really nasty at the end of it. So it could be, yeah, that looks really nice on you, it doesn't really fit you though, does it? It's a bit tight. So if you say something, they will then say, I've just said you look nice, what's wrong with you? You always want to argue. So you then think, oh, he did just say I look nice and I've created another argument, what's wrong with me? So then next time you'll think, oh, I won't bother saying anything. And that's when you notice your identity start to dissolve, because you're no longer standing up for yourself or saying things that you would have done because you've learned, oh, I best not say that because that would just start an argument.
It feels like it's almost any form of communication of wants and needs is totally dismissed, and then this like absolute internalization where you just start to crumble and disappear. And also the way you're explaining it, and from, you know, experiences I've had working with clients, I think in my training, when I was reading about these types of things, I expected a narcissism to be really just explosive and a lot of arguing and, you know, like a lot of shouting, which you can't, obviously it can be, but a lot of clients were coming to me, and the clients I've worked with, and they'd explain it such a subtle conversation, no undertones of like aggression in the way that things might have been when the gaslighting was happening. So that example you just give, I've just said you look nice, so like, why are you making a big deal of it? Quite conversational. And for me, it just feels like that shows the level of manipulation that can happen in, I think, a lot of ways that people don't expect, which almost leads me on to my next question of, how do you know if something is toxic, like a toxic relationship? And do you think that people have unhelpful expectations of what they think it should look like?
So I'll answer your first question. I always say, ignore the diagnosis. So what everyone is doing is they're trying to diagnose everyone with narcissistic personality disorder. So clients will come to me and they'll want to talk about the narcissist and completely forget about themselves. And then they'll say, I don't know if they're a narcissist because they've not been diagnosed. Well, that doesn't matter whatsoever. Many narcissistic people will go undiagnosed, because the only people that really going to get diagnosed with that is if they're in prison, or if they've been sectioned, or if it's mandatory, really. No narcissist is openly going to get that diagnosis. So, but I just say, forget about it. Don't worry about it. How are you feeling? How is this person making you feel? If they're making you feel exhausted, if they're making you feel unworthy, unwanted, unseen, unheard, you don't resemble the person that you was once before being with them. You don't see your friends or family as much. You don't do the things you want. You put their needs all the time before your own. That is toxic. If you feel like that you can't have a conversation where both of you are listening to each other and there's understanding and there's compassion, something's not right within this relationship. The dynamics are wrong. It should be equal in a relationship where you feel comfortable. But if you are stopping yourself from saying something with fear of what the response or what the reaction that you're going to get, then that's come from somewhere. That's learned behavior, where you're no longer doing the things that you would automatically do. Something's happened there. So you're acting out of character.
You see the full spectrum of abuse in narcissistic relationships, like clients who come to you? Can you see everything from, you know, emotional, physical, financial?
Yeah. You have some people that are very quickly to say, but he's never hit me, or that he's never hit me.
Yeah.
Okay. But abuse isn't just physical. In fact, the clients that see me that have suffered emotional and physical say, I actually prefer the physical because the emotional is absolutely horrendous. Someone doesn't have to punch you for you to be in an abusive relationship. Narcissistic people break you down because they actually enjoy it. They enjoy hurting other people because it makes them feel good because of how low they are. They enjoy breaking you down. And a lot of clients come to me, and you know, I see people in very high-powered jobs that are so responsible in making big decisions, and yet they say, I can't believe I have been subjected to narcissism. How have I let this happen? You know, I'm like a massive boss, and I'm responsible for so many things, and yet I go home and I just completely melt, and I'm terrified of even asking what's for dinner or anything like that. And it's because it's a very different dynamic. You're a different version of when you are at work than you are at home. I say it's like a slow murder being with a narcissist, because you don't just go in and then, because the narcissist at the beginning loves everything about you. They love your hair, they love what you wear, they love your friends, everything about you is so perfect. They have been waiting for you to come into their life because they've never been happier. Fast forward 6 months or a year or 2 years, and they hate everything about you, and they've needed to change everything about you. So very slowly it's, oh, do we have to see mum and dad this weekend? Or I don't really like your friends. I don't know what you see in them. I don't think you should wear tops like that. I mean, you can see everything. You might as well just put a jumper on. Very, very slowly, they change you. And it's so hard to see. I always go back to the frog analogy. If you put a frog in boiling water, it will jump out. If you leave it in cold water and turn the heat up, it will just stay in there and it will die. That's exactly what it's like being in these types of relationships. You don't see it when you're in it. And don't blame yourself for that, because including myself and thousands of people that I've spoken to have all said the same.
So then what's the point where, if it's difficult to see when they're in it, what's the awareness or almost like the trigger point that brings them to therapy? Is there almost this sense of, like you said, I've heard it described as soul murder. So does it get to that point where it's like literally they have nothing left to give and therapy feels like the next option? And do sometimes you feel like you're dropping a bombshell on them that they never expected?
I think that when they get to the stage of coming to see myself or someone like yourself, they need to be told that they are not going crazy. So when they come and they just spill everything out, it might be the first time that they've ever told anyone the truth, because they're scared of telling anyone, because they've done such a good job of manipulating your friends and family, that finally you just get to say what's actually happened. And it's just to be heard, and it's also believed. Because I know for myself, no one believed me. I would be screaming in pain, talking, even therapists, and yet I was still not believed. And the amount of people that just my first sentence is, I believe you, and they break down, because it's like, oh my God, I'm not going crazy. Somebody understands me. And this is why I think it's so important that more therapists are more narcissistically abuse trauma informed, because you can understand the language of gaslighting. Because clients have come to me from other therapists that have said, well, actually they blamed me, and I can vouch for that, because I was blamed as well, because he manipulated the other therapists in how wonderful he was, and I was just awful. But just being able to release, say exactly what's happened, and to be believed, heard and seen, and then to be told this is not your fault.
There's so much power in that. And I think as well, just pulling from an experience with a client of going to those support systems that they believed were there to help, and speaking of this emotional abuse, and it almost just being, it was dismissed just time and time again, and just feeling the exhaustion radiating from them. And it's almost like, it's such a fine line, isn't it? It's like a knife edge when someone just wants to say their truth and it's not believed and it's not held. So I think if anyone is listening to this and is thinking about getting therapy, just the biggest thing I would say is just feeling like your therapist sees you and believes what you're saying, because that could potentially be really traumatic if you go to that space and it's not held in the correct way.
Yeah, I would say if you're going to see someone for narcissistic abuse, make sure that they have experience, either personally, because clients love the fact that I've been through it, because they're not speaking to somebody that's never been through it and understands it. I'm speaking from experience. So I'm literally reliving my experience with them when they're telling me, because I can say, yeah, I experienced that. And just hearing that is, oh God, like you've experienced it as well. So it's not just me that, no, it's not. So just make sure they definitely understand narcissism and the elements within that. So they understand gaslighting, they understand what, you know, that trauma bond looks like and how you break that trauma bond, because it is really, really important.
So you mentioned before hoovering, and I wanted to ask you to explain that, and then the next thing I want to just talk about is, because we're talking about it now, is trauma bonds, what that is. And I think it really feels important for me to give my listeners the space where we really break down what these concepts mean. And I think a part of why that feels important for me is because I just see it so much on social media. I see trauma bonds, like I said before, narcissism, all of these different things, and all of these different explanations, and some of them coming from sources that aren't reliable or qualified to talk about them. So for you, what is a trauma bond and what are the signs of that?
A trauma bond is basically an addiction where you have become so addicted to the highs and lows of this relationship, because it is full of highs and lows. 1 minute you're told how loved you are, how amazing you are, how you're going to be. And that's another thing. Narcissists always make you live in the future. So it's like the dangling carrot. You're going to be doing this. You're going to be having this amazing life. You're going to get married, going to have children. So you're always constantly living in the future and thinking, right, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, because then I'll have this amazing life. So, but it's that push and pull. So 1 minute they're loving you, next minute they withdraw, or they discard you, or they put you down, they leave you for long periods of time. They create an argument and make you feel like that it's all your fault. So you will then do everything possible to get that really nice person back, because that's when your body was giving out the oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, which made you feel good. So you then become so addicted to that, and then when they leave you, you're flooded with cortisol, and then they come back, and then you get all the nice hormones again and chemicals. So you go through up, down, up, down. That is what a narcissistic relationship looks like. It never is stable. You never feel secure in that relationship. You're always feeling that you have to be better or do something, reach a goal that they want you to get to, and then when you feel like that you've got to it, they then move the goalpost. So that's why you never feel secure. You never feel good enough for them. It's very common for them to make out that they're desired by others, or other people think they're so amazing. That's the triangulation part. So you think you're competing with other people all the time to be number one. So yeah, you then become very addicted to this push and pull relationship. So you become so dependent on this person in making you feel good, because you've lost everything. You've literally given everything to them. You've invested time, you've invested love. You now depend on them to even function, because this is such a highly addictive addiction, toxic love. Breaking that trauma bond is exactly the same as what I would say to anyone that has to give up alcohol or drugs. You have to go no contact. And of course, you're going to get withdrawal symptoms. Now, I know in many cases that I speak to, they can't go no contact because they're having to co-parent, or as we call it, counter-parent with them. But that's when we talk about the grey rock method, where you're being very emotionless with them. You're not giving them supply or energy. But if you really want to break a trauma bond, then you have to go no contact. It's like it's when people say, oh, but can't I just talk to them, or can't I still have them on social media? No, when I say no contact, it means their numbers disappeared and blocked, off social media, absolutely everything, pictures gone, off your phone, because every time you look at them, or you look at them on social media and see them portraying the amazing life that they're leading, you're just self-harming yourself. That's like an alcoholic going down the aisle of the alcohol, wanting it but can't drink it. And that's what I would say. That's like me saying to an alcoholic, well, you can't go into recovery if you're still drinking. You can't overcome or break a trauma bond if you're still having contact, because that is your addiction, and you have to see it as an addiction.
I think something that you oh, my mind just went blank, but there was this, when people say, and I hear women say this so often, he's moved on and he's given this other woman everything that I wanted. That feels like a classic, if you were to keep a narcissist on social media, a classic move that they would make just to make you feel even worse. And like, he didn't give you everything, or she didn't give you everything, and it was your fault. So the internalization of that. And one of the misconceptions people think about trauma bonds, I've had people ask me this, is that two people just bond over trauma that they've had. So that's not the case. Is only a trauma bond formed if a relationship is abusive or narcissistic?
Yes, because it is an addiction. You're addicted to that person, that you're actually addicted to chemical releases. So people will put themselves through 5-6 days of abuse, of your body being flooded with cortisol, your body being in a trauma response of fight, flight, freeze, or fall, knowing that at some point it's going to get that hit again of the oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, which makes them feel good. So they will put themselves through 6 days of abuse, of cortisol, and then one day, amazing, massive hit, and then go back.
When we're good, we're good. When we're bad, it's bad. That common thing that you hear.
Yeah. Another thing I commonly hear, and I also said it myself, is I can't imagine my life without him. I don't even know how to function properly. People say, I can't, if they leave me, if they discard me, I can't sleep, I can't work, I can't function, I can't concentrate, but yet if he comes back, I can sleep. So this must be a good thing, he must be good for my life. No, it's because your body is under so much stress that when he comes, or they come back, it's like, oh, you're exhausted. And because it is exactly the same as you going through withdrawal of any drug or alcohol, where you're climbing the walls, you're all you can think about, you can't sleep, you're erratic, loads of different, and then you have a drink or you have that drug, and then it's, my body. It's because you've given your body the drug that it's craving for. It's not the person.
And this just happens without us having almost like any control over it, just because we're in these environments, and that's a lot to think about. Like, these addictions are formed to people. How can somebody tell if they are, for you, what's the difference between seeing PTSD symptoms in clients that are coming in versus the trauma impact of being in a narcissistic relationship? Do you see a difference in the two, or do you think it's just the impact is the impact? Yeah,
I mean, 99.9% of the people I see have complex PTSD. So PTSD is like a one-time event, say like a car crash. Complex PTSD is abuse that you receive over a long period of time. So narcissistic abuse clients will have this.
Just as a side note, there's a really good book I read on complex PTSD. To anyone listening, I'll put that on the show notes. It's a really good, easy, digestible read, and it might be helpful if anyone's wanting to explore complex PTSD from being in a relationship. So next question I want to ask is, healing from a toxic relationship can be really challenging. And what strategies and coping mechanisms can people use to begin the healing process, to rebuild their self-esteem, and to help with the trauma they're experiencing?
One of the first things I say is, don't put too much pressure on yourself. Narcissistic abuse has such a huge impact in so many different ways. So it could be psychologically, mentally, it could be physically. So don't give yourself unrealistic expectations of, I want to be fixed. Don't see it as a destination, see it as a journey. And with any recovery method, you have to live day by day. Just do not put yourself under huge amounts of pressure, because you're going through a healing process, which everybody's different. We don't know what people have been through. So it's going to be very different if someone's just had a narcissistic relationship for 6 months and they just feel completely like whirlwinded and they haven't got a clue what's going on, but it has really affected them. As opposed to somebody that's realised, oh my God, I've experienced narcissistic abuse my whole life. My parents are, now I'm joining all the dots, and I've really got to take some time to understand what on earth has happened.
That's a core shape and realization, isn't it? Like it really is.
Yeah. And so this is why it's really good to work with somebody, to go at your own pace and look at what your needs are, because it might be behavior patterns that you need to look at. So many people, pretty much everybody, has changed their behavior patterns because of narcissistic abuse. You no longer act your true self. Look at the things that you are doing now as opposed to what you were before. Now, the brain doesn't necessarily know that you are out of this narcissistic relationship. So if you've broken up, but you're still acting as if you are in this relationship, this is very normal, because the brain doesn't recognize that you are out of it. You may have trust issues. You may not even trust yourself. Again, very normal. So it's about confidence building within you and learning who you are and trusting yourself again, because if you can't trust yourself, then you're not going to trust anybody else. Confidence is a big one. It's goals, like what you want to do, and also your limitations. So again, don't put too much pressure on yourself. Give yourself realistic goals, because at the moment your brain has gone through so much trauma. So part of your brain called the amygdala gets affected. So actually this abuse does cause some kind of brain damage. So the amygdala part of the brain, if you imagine a smoke alarm in your house, it's always on and it's just ready to alert you if it smells smoke. That part of the brain is there to alert you of any danger. Now, when you're in a narcissistic relationship, that's going off all the time, because it's your nervous system is in fight, flight, freeze or fawn. It's always in a trauma response. So you may notice that you're massive high alert now. Everybody's a risk. You don't trust anybody. You know, the person that you've had a relationship, whether it's a man, woman, same-sex relationship, that gender could be, you'd be on high alert all the time. You don't, for me, I didn't trust men after. Didn't believe a word they said. I actually hated them, didn't want to be around them. And it was because my brain was saying, men's a danger to you.
Wow.
You trusted this person and he destroyed you, or he tried. So then you've got to learn to realize, okay, not everybody's like this, but then you've got to learn good boundaries. Look at yourself. Are you oversharing too much? Who have you got in your circle of trust? Because that's important. Only people in your circle of trust should know intimate information about you. So there are just so many things, like breaking behavior patterns, creating healthy boundaries, rebuilding your identity, taking back control, hearing you and hearing who you are, not what other people are telling that you are. Just being able to give yourself some space, allow you to hear you and what you need.
That sounds like it takes time, and I almost wondered if, I ponder on this being a therapist myself, if the whole online coaching space is now making people feel like quick results, like they can come in and, within 6 weeks, core body image issues that, have undertones of trauma, well, they can be completely eradicated. And it's just like seeing that, with not seeing it in a spoken way, but seeing the undertones of like certain expectations of how people think that they can just really find fast, quick fixes to these things is just like, it's super interesting to me. And I think, with this type of stuff, with any type of trauma, with any type of healing really, but especially something as complex as this, it is really a commitment. And I think I imagine for you as the therapist as well, it's holding that back and forth that clients come into sessions with, because I imagine it's not just a straightforward journey. I imagine sometimes they come in and take, steps back, and there might be sessions where they miss that person and they wondered if everything that they've said is truth and they want to be back in that. And then a couple of weeks later, they might be feeling confident and strong. So do you see that back and forth? I know you're going to say you do, but is that, the clients expect to go through such up and downs when they break out of the relationships?
I personally think nobody really knows what to expect when they come out of these relationships. I have so many people that contact me and say, well, how many sessions before I'm fixed or I'm better? And I'm like, how long's a piece of string? I don't know what your trauma background is. I don't know what you've experienced, as in narcissistic abuse. I can't tell you. It'd be very unprofessional of me to say, yeah, come and join me for 6 weeks, do this, and you'll be fixed. Anyone that tells you that is lying. Because when we talk about trauma, we don't know how quick your body or how slow your body is going to take. If I push your nervous system too quickly, it's just going to flood you, and then you'll feel worse, and you're going to go backwards, you're not going to go forward. So we have to take it very, very slowly. So it's like with that ventral vagus nerve system, is like you like, if you imagine in a car, you don't just put your foot on the accelerator and you just, you'll hit your head and you just go really fast and then slam on the brakes again because your nervous system's gone, oh my God, I'm really scared. That's what would happen if I just went, yeah, let's do trauma therapy straight away. Let's focus on all the traumatic things that's happened in your life, and that's it. Your nervous system will be flooded. So we have to take it at the client's pace. And some days they'll feel really confident, they'll be happy, and then other days they'll feel like they don't want to get out of bed again. And that's a very normal cycle to feel when you're going through recovery of narcissistic abuse.
Yeah, it's so safety is so important. And do you experience, you touched on trust. Do you find that clients come in potentially distrusting because of, you were saying before, around how they can tend to trust people? Or do you feel like just saying to them, I believe you, helps so much more in that healing process?
I think for me personally, I think people trust me because I'm also a survivor of narcissistic abuse. So they're talking to a fellow survivor. They're not talking to somebody that, has read this from a book and is going to judge them and think, no, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm going to, diagnose you with something else, or I'm going to tell you, no, it's nothing to do with that. It's all your childhood, which, I do hear a lot. Some therapists want to move you away from what you're desperately wanting to speak to you about and just keep taking you back to childhood, where sometimes you just need to allow someone to talk, because this might be the first time that they've been able to speak out and say what they're truly feeling, not being need to be taken aback and spoken about what happened when you were 3. And we'll come to that. Just tell me what you want to talk about first. And I think it's just really important for the client to feel that you're in a safe place. I'm not judging you in any way. I'm just here with you, and I'm going to walk this journey with you because I've done it before. So I know the hurdles you're going to come up against, and I know how hard it is. But the fact that you're even here, you're incredible.
It almost feels like that hope is so important. And I imagine that clients seeing you in space is probably something that gives them a lot of hope. At times, they feel like, I'm never going to get out of this, or I'm never going to get back to feeling myself again. In terms of narcissistic parents, I'm just really curious how someone might spot a parent who's narcissistic. If you're with somebody, how would they respond with children? Because a lot of these go on to have families and children, and what's that impact that you see?
So people tend to play roles. So narcissists tend to categorize people. So you may have heard the golden child, might hear the scapegoat,
black sheep of the family.
Yes. Children, the thing with children, and if we're talking from a childhood perspective, is that when you are born, you look for comfort, you look for touch, you look for unconditional love, warmth. If you don't get that from a parent, you will learn that love is hard and love is a challenge. And you have to be a certain character to please that parent, which of course you always want to do because you want that love. But that child does then start to believe, you know, this person's not safe or the world isn't safe. So they start to learn, right, I need to be this person to please this parent because then I won't be shouted at or I won't be ignored. You go into people pleasing very quickly, which is where codependency can start from.
Right, okay.
So if you notice that you are constantly doing things to please a parent, ignoring your own needs again, or as you said, black sheep of the family, or if you notice that you're the black sheep but your sister is the golden child, she can't do anything wrong, she's perfect in that parent's eyes, but me, I get told that I'm stupid, I'm put down all the time, I'm left out. Now, why doesn't dad love me like she does? And as a child, you internalize that and think there must be something wrong with me, because as a child, you don't compare. You've got nothing to compare it to. Your parents are your parents. No right from wrong yet. It's only as you grow up. And yeah, I see many people that have come to me that are even in their 50s or 60s that have said, my parents or a parent was very narcissistic, and this has made me feel like unwanted, unloved. I have confidence issues. Why would anyone want to love me for? Because my parent didn't love me. It is really, really hard. Something I've also highlighted to many people is when they say, but my sister is actually quite narcissistic as well. Like, she's showing signs of what my dad used to be like. Now, some children will look at the family dynamic, and if dad is being really nasty to mum, they will see dad's in control. He goes to work. He does all, you know, he has fun. No one has a go at dad, but yet mum, she gets abused. She gets put down. She's always upset. She's crying. If I act like dad, then no one's going to hurt me because no one's hurting dad. And that's where another form of learned behavior can come in, that actually if I act quite narcissistic and the golden child can also pick up on that behavior, then they won't get hurt. And then you might get another child that sees mum and feels really sorry for mum and then goes into that codependency role of wanting to save, wanting to fix, but then attract narcissists in their adult life because that's all they know is love is hard, love is painful. But yeah, I mean, sometimes the dynamics do show very differently. As I say, a family could have 2 children and 2 alcoholic parents. One child will never drink alcohol, the other one might become alcoholic themselves.
That's really interesting. I actually never thought of that around someone adopting those narcissistic traits as a form of safety and protection. But in that case, do you think that would be the personality, the way we can diet? I know we said come away from diagnosis, but if we're looking at the diagnosis for it, or do you think that's something that if they came into therapy could be shifted quite easily by, you know, doing work around safety, doing work around dynamics growing up, and almost those tendencies would start to fall away if more safety was formed? Or do you think if someone starts to adopt those, that's kind of what they become?
It can be who they become. And when we talk about narcissistic personality disorder and actually being diagnosed and why someone becomes a narcissist, again, it's quite broad. You know, a lot of it is due to abuse in childhood, but then another you know, part of that could be love too much. You know, get too much love. or one of these pushy parents that's, you've got to be the best at this, you've got to win, you've got to be on stage because you make me look good. A child is only going to get love if they achieve, and you don't feel love unless you're achieving, but actually you might not want to do the things. So it is very complicated, and that is probably another 2-hour conversation on why someone becomes a narcissist. But because we're talking to victims of narcissism, I would just say focus on you, what you're experiencing. You wasn't put on this earth to be abused by somebody else.
You know what I was just about to ask then, and then I almost had the realization that they probably wouldn't think this way. But I was thinking, I wonder if someone was listening to this and thinking, I have narcissistic tendencies. But do you think they would have the capacity to register that and think that?
A true narcissistic person that would have full-on NPD would not question themselves. So if you're sitting there now thinking, maybe I'm the narcissist, no, you're not, because you wouldn't even ask that if you're a narcissist. Everybody has narcissistic traits.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson talks about that a lot. He talks about how everyone has tendencies of narcissism, and he speaks about it specifically in like 2-year-olds. He said that's why you can tend to see that behavior, because they're so like self-absorbed. And I remember hearing that, and when I started listening to his work, and I thought, wow, everyone has narcissistic tendencies. That's an interesting concept. But yeah, what you were about to say.
I was going to say everyone has narcissistic tendencies, traits, and it can be healthy narcissism, as in like if you want to be really good at something, as in a competition or being well at business, then you are thinking about yourself. Now, there's a big difference between thinking about yourself to achieve as opposed to destroying somebody else's career to move up. And I always remember the first time ever anyone told me about this was, everyone else has an element of narcissism. If you imagine being in a workplace, and this isn't my analogy, but there's like a load of donuts and sweets put out for people, you would want to get there before other people get there because you want one. Now you would take one, maybe two, but look, oh yeah, there's loads for everybody else. As opposed to a narcissistic person would just think, I want all of that, and I couldn't care less about anybody else.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
A good visual one.
So you're thinking of others as well as thinking about yourself.
Yeah, okay. 2 last things I want to ask. Are there any self-help resources, books or exercises you recommend for individuals or listeners trying to understand and recover from narcissistic abuse, and how they can educate themselves in a way that's appropriate and not by scrolling on TikTok?
So I have created My Nara, which stands for My Narcissistic Abuse Recovery App. And within that, this is an app that I created about all the things that I needed when I was in a narcissistic relationship. The functionalities are that you can store evidence as you start to see what's happening. So voice notes, text messages, picture messages, recordings, you can store all within the app, and it's all dated. So you can start to really see and build up a picture and see the behaviour patterns change of this person, as well as collating evidence which you may need via a custody battle, divorce, or even a custodial sentence, hopefully. So as well as tracking red flags, like you can track how many red flags you're seeing, so you're seeing the number go up. A no contact calculator, so can track your days no contact or grey rock. And there's also a 12-step recovery program that you do at your own pace. Now, this isn't saying at the end you're going to be fixed, and this is never a replacement for a therapist. I would say do it as well as seeing a therapist, but I know that therapists cost a lot of money. So if you're not able to do that, then this is a very good guide of the different stages that you experience. I've put a lot of stuff within that I do with clients one-to-one, and you may go through to phase 4 at no contact, and then you break no contact, like many people do. And you can just go back and do the program at your own pace. So that is one I would really recommend. I would always say Dr. Ramani. Dr. Ramani was my safe haven when I was going through it. She made a lot of things that I was going through make sense. So YouTube, Dr. Ramani is a very good one. They're not very long videos, which is great, because when you're going through trauma, your attention span is probably like 2 minutes. And be around healthy people. I'd say that. Try, look at your surroundings and who you've got around you, and try to remove those toxic people. Be around people that wants to see you do well and support you through this journey. You actually kind of want to get every toxic person away from you when you are doing healing. It may come across as selfish, and people might think, oh no, I can't do that, but actually it's okay to be selfish when you're healing.
Yeah, I agree. And then lastly, in your experience, how can people use their experiences from being in a relationship like this to foster personal growth and develop healthier relationships in the future?
Again, it's all about yourself. I say, if you're happy within yourself, then you will never depend on another person to make you happy. Don't ever give someone that control, because as much as someone can make you happy, they can always take that away from you and make you unhappy. So if you're happy anyway, then that person can only add to your happiness. They don't become it. Don't ever let anyone become your happiness. And just look at the things that you want to achieve. Look at the things you want to do. There is a thing called post-traumatic growth, which you apparently only get once. So if you feel it, it's like someone catapulting you. You get this burst of energy. It's like you want to achieve so much and you've got the capability of doing it, and you just drive everything through it. I generally think that's what I experienced, which is why I have achieved what I've done in a very short space of time, because I became obsessed with it, and I took the trauma and turned it into growth, and I used that trauma. Because I actually remember, if anyone's watched Matilda and they remember that she could only do her magic when people were having a go at her and being horrible to her, she used that trauma to do great things, to do her magic. And then she learned that she didn't need to hear all that trauma and that screaming anymore, that she could just do her magic because she got to that healing point. That is exactly what post-traumatic growth is. Get to that point where you don't need to hear that you can't do that, you're pathetic. No one's good. Like, go through, use that to get you to a point, and then allow yourself to just grow.
That's so inspirational. And is it possible, I mean, obviously I know it is, but just for people listening to this, is it possible after an experience like this to feel safe in love, to feel safe in yourself, to, get to the point where those wounds are healed over, and sometimes they might feel tender, but all in all, you're thriving and you get that safe love?
Absolutely. Don't rush into a relationship though. Give yourself some time to heal for you. And yes, you can go on to having healthy relationships, because you'll have a healthy relationship with yourself. Don't think by replacing one narcissistic relationship with another is going to solve anything, because it really doesn't. Those wounds are still there. The reason why alcoholics still say they're in recovery after being in sobriety for 30 years is because they will always be addicted to alcohol. I know I'm always going to be addicted to narcissistic love. So just be very mindful, keep those boundaries strong, and be very, very self-aware of red flags. Be confident enough to say, no, you're not for me. I've seen 2-3 red flags and I'm walking away. Have that confidence within yourself.
I love that. Where can people find you?
So mytraumatherapy.co.uk if you want one-to-ones. But if you would like to join the My Nara app at the moment, as in August, we are a web-based app, so you'll have to go to www.mynara.app. As in September 2023, you can get it in the app stores. So My Nara is MYNARA.
Amazing. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have the conversation with you. And I think, yeah, it's just such an insightful, important conversation. And I appreciate you taking the time to be on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Lydia. I really appreciate it. Love being here.